The first thing Lila heard was the snap of a white glove against her wrist. Not a slap, not a punch, just that sharp, controlling sound that meant, "Stop, you don't belong." The marble steps of the Arden Hotel were warm from the lights, but her hands were cold around the cream envelope. Gold letters shimmered on it like they were mocking her. Security. A man in a dark suit stood between her and the glass doors where laughter spilled out like perfume. "You can't go in," he said, loud enough for the line behind her to hear. Someone in a sequined dress glanced at Lila's thrift store coat and smirked. Another person whispered, "Is that a kid?" Lila's face burned. She tried to speak, but her voice stuck under her tongue like a swallowed stone. She lifted the envelope anyway. "I have an invitation," she managed. The guard didn't even look at it. "Nice try," he said, and his eyes flicked past her, as if the paper in her hands was blank. Her shoes were damp from the bus stop. Her hair still smelled faintly like laundry soap from the shelter's shared machines. And suddenly, all she could think was how loud the lobby music sounded through the revolving doors. How close she was to that world, and how far. "Please," she said again, quieter this time. "It's addressed to me." The guard finally took the envelope between two fingers like it might stain him. He glanced at the name and something changed in his expression, not softer, stranger. He looked up at her, then down again, like he was checking if she matched some picture in his head. Behind him, the chandelier-lit lobby swirled with tuxedos and gowns. At the far end, a banner read Mercer Foundation Gala in elegant black letters. "Where did you steal this?" the guard asked. Lila's throat tightened. "I didn't," she whispered. "It came to the shelter." A laugh bubbled from someone nearby. The guard handed the envelope back, not gently. "Listen, kid," he said, leaning in, voice low and sharp. "The donors are inside. The press is inside. If you make a scene, you'll be trespassed. Understand?" What did trespassed even mean when you didn't have anywhere else to go? Why would someone send her an invitation to a gala like this, with her name written so carefully it looked like art? And why did the guard's face look like he had seen a ghost when he read it? Lila's fingers squeezed the envelope until the paper creased. She wanted to run, to disappear into the dark street where no one would stare. But she also wanted to know the truth more than she wanted to breathe. She took one step back, then another, the cold air catching in her lungs. The glass doors opened as a couple walked out laughing, and for a second, Lila saw inside, silver trays, crystal glasses, a violinist, and a man with silver hair stepping up to a small stage, tapping a microphone. The host, Elias Mercer, the name she had only seen on donation plaques and newspaper headlines. He looked calm, powerful, like the whole room belonged to him. Then he glanced down at a clipboard in his assistant's hands, and his smile faded, as if he had just read something that didn't belong in a perfect night. Lila didn't know it yet, but her name was on that page, and the moment he saw it, everything started to bend. Lila hadn't always been brave. Most days her bravery looked like small things, waking up before the younger kids so she could braid 9-year-old Mina's hair without tangles, hiding the last 2 granola bars in her backpack for Jonah, who pretended he wasn't hungry, and smiling at the shelter director so Mrs. Dallow wouldn't see how scared she really was about the next bill, the next inspection, the next letter that might say they had to leave. Lila was 17, and she had learned the math of survival the way other girls learned makeup tutorials. $2 could mean bus fare or dinner. One missed shift could mean no shoes that fit. One mistake could mean the streets. So, when the invitation came, she didn't believe it at first. It arrived tucked inside a donated hardcover book, the kind with a cracked spine and a smell like old paper and dust. The book was a collection of essays about kindness and courage, something nobody in the shelter had time to read. Lila found the envelope when it slid out onto her lap. Cream paper, wax seal, her name written in black ink, Lila Hart, not occupant or resident, or to whom it may concern. Her. She had stared at it for a full minute, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was a joke, but no one did. Inside was a single card. You are invited to the Mercer Foundation Gala. Guest of honor. Bring this invitation. A seat has been reserved for you. There was no explanation, no phone number, just a signature at the bottom. E. Mercer. Why would the richest philanthropist in the city reserve a seat for an orphan girl? And why did the ink look like it had been written by someone who took their time, like her name mattered? Lila almost shoved it back into the book and forgot it existed. Hope could be dangerous. Hope could get you hurt. But then she saw something else, faint pencil marks in the book's margin, as if someone had underlined a sentence years ago. The note was small, almost invisible. For Lila, when she's ready. No last name, no date, just those words, pressed into the paper like a whisper from the past. Lila's hands had trembled so hard she had to sit down. Who would write that? Who knew her name before she was even old enough to read? Mrs. Dallow had warned her not to get attached to dreams. People in that world don't send invitations to kids like us, she said, trying to be kind. It's probably a mistake. But Lila couldn't let it go. She couldn't. The day of the gala, she worked an extra shift at the diner, where she wiped tables and refilled coffee. She bought a cheap black dress from a thrift store and stitched the hem by hand so it wouldn't drag. On the bus, she kept touching the envelope in her bag like it was a heartbeat. Halfway there, an older woman dropped her grocery bag on the sidewalk, oranges rolling into the street. Cars honked. People stepped around her like she was invisible. Lila should have kept walking. She was already late. But she bent down anyway, chasing oranges, scooping them into her hands, helping the woman stand. "Thank you," the woman breathed, eyes wet. Lila smiled and said, "It's okay," even though her stomach was twisting with panic. If she missed her moment, would the whole thing vanish? And if she went, would she be humiliated like she was on those hotel steps? When she finally arrived, her hair was frizzed from the cold and her shoes were scuffed. She walked up to the entrance anyway. Inside the lobby, a young waiter carrying a tray paused long enough to notice her. Her thin coat, her tight grip on the envelope, the way she held herself like she was bracing for impact. His name tag read, Theo. He looked like he wanted to say something, but then he kept moving. Lila didn't know it yet, but someone had seen her kindness outside, and someone else had already decided she would never cross that door. As she stood there being questioned by security, she caught a sharp voice from inside, crisp as snapped thread. "Make sure she doesn't get in." Lila turned her head slightly and saw a woman in a silver gown, her smile polished and cold. Vivian Crowne, a board member, the kind of person whose name appeared in the society pages. Vivian's eyes slid over Lila like she was dirt on a shoe. What was Vivian afraid of? And why did Lila's invitation feel less like a ticket and more like a test she didn't understand yet? Lila stepped away from the entrance, not because she was giving up, but because she couldn't breathe with all those eyes on her. The sidewalk felt like a stage, and she was the only person without a costume. She moved toward the edge of the crowd, where the decorative hedges created a small shadowed pocket. The music from inside pulsed through the walls like a steady heartbeat, and the smell of roasted meat and sugar floated out every time the doors opened. Behind her, security murmured into radios. She could feel the weight of the invitation in her bag like a stone. If it was a mistake, why did the guard react so strangely when he read her name? If it wasn't a mistake, then why wasn't anyone helping her? She wiped her palms on her dress and tried to think. She had grown up learning that powerful people didn't change their minds because you begged. They changed their minds when you had proof. Lila looked for a desk, a check-in list, anything official. Near the side entrance, she spotted a small table where staff were scanning guest cards. She took a careful step toward it, rehearsing her words. Then, on the patterned carpet just inside the side door, something caught her eye. A sparkle like a tiny star trapped on the floor. A diamond earring. It was real, she could tell, because it held the light in a way cheap jewelry never did. People walked past it without noticing. Lila froze. She had no right to touch it. Touching it could ruin her life, but leaving it there felt wrong. Someone would lose it and blame the staff, or worse, the first person who looked like they didn't belong. Someone like her. She knelt down, heart racing, and picked it up with 2 fingers, careful not to smudge it. Her mind screamed, "Put it back." Her conscience said, "Return it." She stood and walked toward the check-in table, holding it up. "Excuse me," she said to the attendant. "I found this on the floor." The attendant's eyes widened. Before the woman could speak, Vivian Crowne appeared as if she had been summoned by the word found. She moved fast for someone in heels, her bracelets clinking softly like warning bells. "What is that?" Vivian demanded. Lila held the earring out. "It was on the carpet," she said. "I thought—" Vivian snatched it, her nails perfectly manicured. She turned it over once, and then her face hardened. "Security!" she called, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. The guard from the front appeared, and suddenly there were two of them standing too close to Lila. Vivian's smile returned, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Interesting," she said. "A girl who doesn't have a ticket suddenly has my earring in her hand." Lila's mouth went dry. "I was returning it," she said, voice shaking. "I didn't—" "Of course," Vivian said, her tone sweet like syrup and just as suffocating. "And you just happened to find it." The attendant at the table looked uncertain, as if she wanted to speak, but didn't dare. Theo, the waiter, drifted nearby, his tray lowered slightly. His eyes narrowed like he was paying attention. Lila could feel the room's judgment settling onto her shoulders. She realized, too late, that her small good deed had given them a weapon. Why did doing the right thing always cost her the most? And why did Vivian glance at Lila's bag, almost hungry? The guard reached for Lila's elbow. "We're calling the police," he said. Lila's chest tightened. Police meant questions. Questions meant records. Records meant the shelter. She tried to pull away, and the invitation slipped halfway out of her bag, the wax seal catching the light. Vivian's eyes flicked to it, and for a split second something like panic flashed across her face before she smoothed it away. On the back of the earring, engraved in tiny letters, Lila saw something Vivian didn't notice. Two sets of initials, VC and, beneath them, MH. Lila didn't know what those letters meant yet, but she felt a chill crawl up her spine. The guard's radio crackled. "Hold her," a voice said. "Mr. Mercer is about to speak." Lila's heart pounded as she realized the host was about to address the room, and her name, her life, was about to be decided without her. Inside, Elias Mercer stepped fully onto the stage, and the room obeyed him the way a quiet lake obeys the wind. Glasses stilled. People turned their bodies toward his voice, not because they were kind, but because he mattered. Lila could see him through the open archway, framed by warm light. He looked older than the photos, his hair more silver, his eyes sharper. He held a sheet of paper, and as he glanced down at it, something flickered across his face. Surprise first, then something deeper, like a door in his memory had been yanked open. He leaned toward the microphone. "Before we begin," he said, calm but firm, "I need a moment." A murmur ran through the room. Vivian's posture stiffened, but she kept her smile. The guards tightened their grip on Lila's arms as if they could keep the truth outside by force. Elias looked to his assistant, a woman with a sleek ponytail and a tablet in her hands. She whispered something to him. Elias shook his head once. "No," he said into the mic, his voice suddenly colder. "Bring her in. Now." The room went still, as if the air itself had been ordered to stop moving. Vivian's smile cracked at the edges. "Elias," she called lightly, like she was teasing him. "We're in the middle of—" Elias didn't look at her. He looked toward the entrance, straight toward Lila, like he could see through walls. "Lila Hart," he said, and the sound of her name in his mouth felt unreal, like hearing someone read your secret thoughts out loud. "She is my invited guest." The guards hesitated. People turned to stare. Lila's knees went weak. How did he know she was even outside? Why did his voice sound like relief and anger mixed together? The guards let go, suddenly unsure, and Lila stumbled forward, her cheeks burning as she walked through the doorway into a room that smelled like roses and money. Every eye landed on her. She felt the softness of the carpet under her worn shoes. She heard a violinist stop mid-note. Elias stepped down from the stage and crossed the floor with steady purpose. Up close, he looked like someone who had spent years holding heavy choices. He stopped in front of her, and his gaze dropped to her hands, to the envelope to her throat. Lila instinctively touched the small locket she always wore, a cheap-looking pendant on a thin chain. It was the only thing she had from before the shelter, passed to her by a social worker, who said it had been found with her as a baby. Elias's eyes widened as if someone had punched him without touching him. "Where did you get that?" he asked, voice low. Lila swallowed. "It's mine," she said. even though she wasn't sure what mine meant anymore. I've had it my whole life. Elias's jaw tightened. And the invitation, he said, taking it gently now, reverently. He flipped it over, stared at the signature, and for a moment, the powerful man on the stage looked like someone trying not to fall apart. I wrote this, he whispered, almost to himself. Lila's stomach flipped. You did, she breathed. Vivian stepped closer, laughing softly, like this was all a charming misunderstanding. Elias, darling, she said, if you're inviting street girls now, at least teach them not to steal. The room tensed. Elias turned his head slowly, and the look he gave Vivian could have cut glass. No one is accusing her of anything, he said. Not tonight. Lila's lungs finally drew a full breath. One question had been answered. Her invitation was real. But two new ones crashed into her at once. Why would Elias Mercer write it? And why did her locket make him look like he'd seen someone he lost? Before she could ask, a hand brushed her shoulder in the crowd. Too quick, too smooth. Lila felt a tiny tug at her neck, like a thread being pulled. Her fingers flew up. The chain was still there, but the pendant was gone. Her locket, the only proof she had of anything, had vanished right in the middle of the room. For a second, Lila couldn't move. She stared at the empty chain against her skin, her heartbeat roaring in her ears louder than the whispers rising around them. What's wrong? Elias asked, noticing her face. Lila's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Then she forced it. My locket, she said, voice cracked. It was here. Someone took it. Vivian's eyes flashed, and then she placed a hand over her chest with perfect theater. Oh, she said softly. Is that what you call it? A locket. She lifted her own hand, and dangling from her fingers was the pendant. Lila's pendant. It looked wrong against Vivian's expensive rings, like a small bird caught in a trap. This, Vivian said, turning it so the light hit it, this belongs to me. Lila's whole body went cold. No, she said, stepping forward without thinking. That's mine. It's been mine since you stole it? Vivian interrupted, her voice still sweet. Elias, this is embarrassing. That pendant was a family piece lost years ago. I wondered where it went. Lila's hands shook. You're lying, she whispered. But the room didn't love whispers. The room loved confidence. The room loved power. Vivian held the pendant up toward Elias, as if she were presenting evidence. If you want to keep your gala respectable, she said, you'll handle this privately. The donors are watching. Lila felt dozens of eyes watching, measuring, deciding. She thought of Mina's small hands, Jonah's too big hoodie, Mrs. Dallow's tired smile. If she was arrested or even accused publicly, what would happen to the shelter's reputation? What would happen to the donations Mrs. Dallow fought for every month? Vivian knew that. Vivian's gaze slid to Lila like she was reading her fear. Theo appeared near the edge of the crowd again, his face tight. He leaned closer to Lila and whispered, barely moving his lips, I saw her assistant bump you. That's when it happened. Lila blinked at him. You did? She whispered back. Theo nodded once. But seeing isn't proof, he murmured. Elias's assistant, the woman with the ponytail, stepped closer, eyes alert. Mr. Mercer, she said quietly, we can check the security feed. Vivian laughed, light and cruel. Please, she said, are we really going to pause the gala for a street girl's little drama? Lila's face burned again, but this time the heat was anger, not shame. Was Vivian doing this because she truly believed Lila was a thief, or because she was terrified of something else? And why would Vivian's earring have initials that didn't match her name? Elias didn't answer right away. He looked at Vivian, then at Lila, then at the crowd that could turn against him if he chose wrong. Finally he said, we will handle this with facts. Vivian's smile tightened. Of course, she said. Facts. Then she turned slightly toward the microphone on the stage and raised her voice, letting it float over the room like smoke. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, it seems we have had an unfortunate mistake in our guest list. A hush fell. Lila's stomach dropped. Vivian looked straight at her as if daring her to fight back. A thief, Vivian said, has been invited into our midst. Lila felt the floor tilt. Elias's jaw clenched, and he started forward. But Vivian was already walking toward the stage with the pendant in her hand like a trophy. Lila realized, with sudden clarity, that Vivian wasn't just trying to embarrass her. Vivian was trying to bury her. And if Lila didn't stop her now, the shelter, her family, might be the next thing Vivian took. Vivian's voice filled the ballroom, smooth and steady, the way people sounded when they had never been afraid of sleeping outdoors. "We believe in giving," she said to the crowd, smiling. "But we also believe in standards." The word standards landed like a slap without a hand. Lila stood frozen near the edge of the room, while guests murmured, some scandalized, some entertained. She caught snatches of whispers. Who is she? Did she really steal? How did she get in? Her throat tightened until it hurt. Elias took a step toward the stage, but donors were watching him too, judging if he could control his own event. The assistant with the ponytail moved closer to Lila. "I'm Nora," she whispered, urgent. "Come with me. Don't let her make this public without a response." Lila's legs finally obeyed. Nora guided her through a side corridor that smelled like lemons and polished wood, away from the music and the staring. Theo followed, his tray abandoned somewhere, his face pale. They entered a small office where the walls were lined with framed photos of past galas, smiling rich people holding oversized checks. Nora closed the door. "Tell me everything," she said. Lila's hands were shaking so badly she had to sit. "That pendant," Lila whispered. "It has a clasp. There's something inside. I've never opened it because I didn't want to break it. But when Mr. Mercer saw it, he looked like it mattered." Nora's eyes narrowed. "And Vivian has it now," she said. "That's not good." Theo swallowed. "I saw Vivian's assistant," he said. "Tall guy, red tie." He brushed her shoulder. "He took it." Lila looked at Theo. "Why would you help me?" she asked, and the question surprised even her. Theo's jaw tightened. "Because I've watched people like her destroy people like you," he said quietly, "and because you stopped to help that woman outside, even though you were late. That's not nothing." One question had an answer. Someone had taken the locket on purpose. But the bigger question still clawed at Lila. What was inside it that Vivian wanted so badly? Nora tapped quickly on her tablet. "There are cameras in the ballroom," she said. "Also in the corridor near the stage. If we can access the feed, we can show who took it." Lila's phone buzzed suddenly in her pocket. She flinched, expecting another blow. It was a message from Mrs. Dallow at the shelter. Just 4 words. They called. Funding threatened. Lila's blood ran cold. She stared at the screen, breath shallow. "Vivian," she whispered. "She's doing this to the shelter." Nora's expression hardened. "That means this is bigger than a pendant," she said. Theo paced once, then stopped. "If we get the footage," he said, "will Mr. Mercer actually go against her?" Lila looked up, eyes stinging. "He has to," she whispered, "because I didn't ask for any of this." Nora nodded sharply. "Then we don't just get footage," she said. "We get the truth." She opened a drawer, pulled out a keycard labeled Security Access, and held it up. "I can get us into the security room," she said, "but if Vivian realizes we're doing this, she'll move faster." Lila swallowed, heart pounding. "How much time do we have?" she asked. Nora's gaze flicked to her tablet where the program schedule glowed. 5 minutes, she said, before Vivian makes the story permanent. Lila stood, legs trembling. "Then we go now," she said, even though fear was squeezing her ribs. As they reached the door, Nora's tablet chimed with a new alert, an anonymous email that popped up on the screen like a bruise. It was addressed to Elias Mercer. The subject line was simple: choose. Nora read it, face draining. Lila leaned in and saw the message. Protect the orphan girl and the shelter closes by morning. Lila's stomach dropped. Vivian wasn't just playing with her reputation. Vivian was holding her whole world hostage. Lila wanted to run back to the shelter that second, to throw herself in front of the door like her body could stop a closure notice. But Nora grabbed her arm. "If you go now, Vivian wins," she said, voice fierce. "She wants you panicked and alone." Lila's eyes burned. "Those kids," she started. Theo stepped in front of her, forcing her to look at him. "The way you protect them," he said softly, "is by stopping the person threatening them." Lila swallowed hard. "How?" she whispered. Nora moved quickly down the corridor, keycard ready. By proving what she's doing, Nora said. Not just to you, not just to the shelter. To everyone. They slipped through a staff-only door into a narrow hall where the air smelled like metal and disinfectant. Their footsteps sounded too loud. At the end was the security room. Nora swiped the keycard. The lock clicked. Inside, multiple screens glowed with camera angles of the gala, ballroom entrances, hallways. A security supervisor looked up, startled. "Nora," he said, "you're not authorized." Nora didn't slow. "Mr. Mercer is authorizing it," she said, and her voice left no space for argument. She leaned over the console. "Pull the feed from the moment Lila entered the ballroom," she ordered. The supervisor hesitated, then complied, fingers moving. Lila's heart hammered as images flickered, herself stepping in, eyes wide, clutching the envelope. Vivian gliding toward her like a shark. Then the moment. Vivian's assistant in a red tie bumping Lila, his hand sliding to her neck with a practiced motion, the pendant disappearing. Theo exhaled sharply. "There," he whispered. Lila's knees went weak with relief and rage. One question answered, who stole it? But another rose immediately. Would this footage be enough to stop someone like Vivian Crowne? Nora zoomed in, capturing the assistant's face. "We need to save this," she said, "and we need more." Lila blinked. "More?" Nora turned, eyes intense. "Vivian isn't risking everything for a cheap pendant," she said. "She's risking everything because it contains something valuable." Theo frowned. "How do we know that?" Lila touched the empty chain again, remembering how the pendant had always felt heavier than it should. "It opens," she whispered. "It has a clasp." Nora's eyes sharpened. "Then Vivian will open it," she said. "And if there's evidence inside, she'll destroy it." Lila's breath caught. Theo looked at the screens. Her assistant went toward the VIP lounge, he said, pointing. "Camera 3. On the screen, the assistant slipped through a velvet rope entrance with the pendant. Nora's jaw clenched. "Then we get it back before she can," she said. "But we don't storm in," Theo warned. "They'll throw us out." Lila's mind raced. She thought of the diner, of watching customers' hands, noticing patterns, who tipped, who lied, who pretended. She thought of the shelter, of learning to read moods like weather. Then she remembered something small, the wax seal on her invitation, the faint scent of lavender that clung to it. The pendant had smelled like lavender too when she was little, when she used to press it to her cheek at night like it could replace a hug. "Lavender," she whispered. Nora blinked. "What?" Lila pointed at the assistant on the screen. "Look at his glove," she said, voice gaining strength. "It's smudged." "Like wax." Nora zoomed, a faint dark streak on the assistant's white glove. "He opened the invitation," Nora murmured, "or touched the seal." Lila's pulse spiked. "If my invitation was meant for me," she said slowly, "then someone expected me to bring the pendant too." Theo stared at her. "You think they go together?" Lila nodded, terrified but sure. Nora saved the clip, then looked at Lila like a decision had been made. "We go to Mr. Mercer," she said. "Now." "With this?" Lila's throat tightened. "What if he's scared?" she asked. "What if he chooses the shelter over me?" Nora's expression softened for half a second. "You are the shelter," she said, "and he's already chosen, whether he knows it or not." They rushed back toward the ballroom, but before they could reach Elias, Vivian's voice rose again over the speakers, sharper now. "Security," Vivian said brightly. "Escort our little guest out before she ruins the night." Lila's stomach dropped. They were out of time, and somewhere behind velvet ropes, Vivian Crowne held the key to Lila's past in her hand, ready to decide what the world would believe. Vivian returned to her table with the pendant, and a smile that looked effortless, but Lila could see the tension under it now, like cracks under fresh paint. Elias stood near the stage, his assistant whispering urgently in his ear, his face controlled but storm-dark. Nora pushed through the crowd with Lila and Theo close behind. Lila's legs felt like glass, but she kept moving. She couldn't let Vivian's story be the only story. She couldn't let the shelter close because she was too afraid to speak. Nora reached Elias first and held out her tablet. "Sir," she said quietly, "we have footage." Elias's eyes flicked to the screen. The moment played. Red tie, quick hand, pendant stolen. Elias's jaw tightened until a muscle jumped. He didn't say a word. He simply watched again, then once more, like he needed to memorize the betrayal. "Where is it now?" he asked, voice low. Theo pointed. "VIP lounge," he whispered. Elias's gaze snapped toward the roped-off area. Vivian caught his look and lifted her glass to him in a small toast, as if daring him. Elias turned back to Lila. "You said it opens," he murmured. Lila nodded, swallowing. "I think there's something inside," she said. "I don't know what." Elias's eyes held hers, and for the first time she saw something in him that wasn't power. It was pain. "I do," he said softly. "Or I have a terrible idea." Lila's breath caught. "What?" she whispered. Elias didn't answer right away. He signaled to 2 staff members, and they moved quietly toward the VIP lounge. "Vivian," Elias called, calm but carrying. Vivian turned, smiling. "Elias," she said, sweet as poison. "Enjoying your charity case?" Elias stepped closer, voice steady. "Give it back," he said. Vivian's smile widened. "Give what back?" she asked, feigning innocence. Elias's hand held out, palm open. "The pendant," he said. Vivian laughed. "You mean my pendant?" she replied. "Sure. But first I'd like to know why you're so invested in a girl you've never met." Lila's throat tightened. Elias glanced at Lila again, and his expression softened just enough to feel like sunlight through clouds. "I have met her," he said quietly. "Just not like this." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "This is a party." Elias's voice dropped. "No," he said. "This is a reckoning." Vivian's smile twitched. She leaned in, lowering her voice so only Elias and those closest could hear. "Be careful," she whispered. "If you humiliate me, donors will leave. Your foundation will suffer. And don't forget the shelter." Lila's stomach turned. Vivian knew about the threat email. Vivian was proud of it. Lila felt the urge to scream, but she forced herself to breathe. One question needed answering before she broke. How could she fight someone who could close doors with a phone call? Theo, watching Vivian's assistant, suddenly stepped forward like he'd made a choice. As a waiter, he belonged in the corners, unseen. He used that. He moved behind the assistant and bumped him, just enough. A small object slipped from the assistant's pocket and clinked softly onto the carpet. A tiny key. Lila's eyes widened. Nora scooped it up before anyone else could notice and pressed it into Lila's palm. Lila stared at it, pulse roaring. "That's from the pendant," she whispered. Theo's face was pale, but his eyes were steady. "He dropped it," Theo murmured, "but I think he already opened it." Lila's chest tightened in panic. "Then, whatever was inside," she started. Elias's voice cut through, louder now. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, turning back to the microphone. The room quieted instinctively. Vivian's expression sharpened. Elias held up Nora's tablet. "We have video evidence of theft," he said calmly. "And we have evidence of something worse." Murmurs rose. Vivian's smile faltered. "Elias," she warned, too late. Elias looked directly at Lila. "Do you trust me?" he asked, and the question felt like a bridge over a cliff. Lila's fingers closed around the tiny key, her whole body trembling. Could she trust a powerful man in a room full of powerful people? Could she risk everything when the shelter was already under threat? She swallowed, then nodded, because there was no other way forward. Elias turned to the crowd again. "We are going to open the truth," he said, and Vivian's eyes flashed with something that finally looked like fear. The ballroom held its breath, as if the whole room had become one living thing. Elias stepped away from the microphone and guided Lila toward a small table near the stage where a decorative box sat, one of those ornate display pieces meant to hold auction cards. "Give me the key," he murmured. Lila placed it in his palm. Her fingers were icy. Elias's hand was warm, steady. Vivian stood a few steps away, her smile gone now, replaced by a tight, controlled stare. "This is absurd," Vivian said, but her voice didn't have the same certainty anymore. Nora stood beside Elias, tablet ready, while Theo lingered just behind Lila like a quiet shield. Elias didn't look at Vivian. He looked at Lila. "When you were little," he said softly, "someone left a promise in motion. A promise I failed to keep fast enough." Lila's breath caught. "What promise?" she whispered. Elias's eyes glistened, but his voice stayed firm. "To protect you," he said. Then he turned to the crowd and lifted his chin. "Many of you know me as the founder of the Mercer Foundation," he said, voice carrying. "You know the name. You know the donations. You know the events." His gaze swept the room. "But you do not know the cost." The room was silent except for the faint clink of glass somewhere. Vivian's jaw tightened. Elias continued. "Years ago, before the foundation had money, before it had influence, it had two people who believed in it more than anyone," he said. "One was me. The other was a woman named Lila Hart." Lila's heart slammed against her ribs. Hart. Her last name. She stared at Elias like the world had tipped. "Lila Hart," he repeated, and his voice softened on the name. "She built our first shelter outreach program. She wrote our earliest grant proposals. She stood in front of doors that were slammed in our faces and kept knocking until they opened." Lila's eyes stung. "My mother," she whispered, the word foreign and aching. Elias looked at her, and in that look was an answer to one question she had carried like a weight. Why did her invitation exist? "Yes," Elias said quietly. "Your mother." Vivian let out a sharp laugh, but it sounded strained. "Elias, stop," she snapped. "Don't turn this into a sob story." Elias's gaze finally swung to Vivian hard. "It's not a sob story," he said. "It's a theft story." Nora tapped her tablet, pulling up a document. Elias lifted the cream envelope, Lila's invitation, and held it up for the room to see. "This invitation was not a mistake," he said. "It was a correction." Lila's knees wobbled. "I don't understand," she whispered to Nora. Nora's face was grim. "Your mother left something behind," she murmured. "And Vivian has been afraid you'd show up." Elias reached into the decorative box and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "There was a second piece," he said to the crowd. "A pendant designed to hold a letter and a key. It was meant to be opened when the time was right." Vivian's eyes snapped toward him. "You can't prove anything," she hissed. Elias lifted Nora's tablet again and replayed the theft footage on the ballroom screens. Gasps rippled through the room. One question was answered for everyone now. Lila hadn't stolen the pendant. Vivian's team had stolen it from her. Vivian's face whitened, but she forced her shoulders back. "Fine," she said, voice sharp. "My assistant acted without my permission." Elias's expression didn't change. "Then you won't mind what comes next," he said. He took the velvet pouch and opened it. Inside was a folded letter, aged and carefully preserved, and a small flash drive attached to a thin ribbon. Lila's breath caught. "That was inside my locket," she whispered. Elias nodded once. "The letter was written by your mother," he said, "and it names the person who stole from this foundation for years." Vivian stepped forward, voice rising. "Don't you dare!" Elias raised a hand, stopping her like a wall. He unfolded the letter slowly, and the room leaned in, hungry for scandal, for truth, for something to talk about tomorrow. Lila's chest tightened. What if the letter was wrong? What if it shattered the only fragile hope she'd ever held? Elias began to read, and as he spoke, Vivian's perfect world started to collapse in front of everyone who used to clap for her. Elias's voice was steady, but Lila could hear the emotion under it like a trembling string. He didn't read every word out loud. Some things felt too private for a ballroom, but he read enough. He read how Lila Hart had discovered missing funds, how donation money meant for shelters had been rerouted through event expenses and consulting fees. He read how Mara confronted Vivian Crowne, who at the time had been a rising board member with a smile and a sharp mind. He read how Vivian threatened Mara's job, her safety, her unborn child's future. Lila's breath hitched at that. Unborn child. Her. Elias paused then, looking up as if he needed the room to understand the stakes. "Mara wrote this letter because she knew she might not be believed while she was alive," he said, voice tight. "So she built evidence. She hid it where only the person she trusted most would find it. Her daughter." Lila's legs felt like they might give out. She grabbed the edge of the table, knuckles white. "I was planned," she whispered, overwhelmed. Nora leaned close. "Not planned like that," she murmured gently. "Protected." Elias held up the flash drive. "This contains records," he said. "Transfers, emails, contracts." Vivian's voice came out sharp, almost a squeak. "That could be fabricated," she snapped. but the donors around her were already shifting away, like rats sensing a sinking ship. Elias turned to the head of the board, an older man who looked suddenly tired. "You will have this analyzed," Elias said firmly. "Tonight." The board member swallowed and nodded, eyes wide. Vivian tried one last angle, twisting her face into wounded outrage. "Elias," she said, voice trembling dramatically, "you're letting an orphan girl manipulate you with some sad letter. Look at her. She's desperate. She'd say anything to get money." Lila flinched, shame sparking. But it didn't stick the way it used to. Something inside her had hardened into steel. She stepped forward before she could stop herself. Her voice shook, but it carried. "I didn't come for money," Lila said. Heads turned. "I came because someone told me my name mattered," she continued, holding up the creased invitation. "And because my shelter got threatened today. Because kids who have nothing got used as a weapon." Murmurs rose, angry now. One donor frowned. Another whispered, "Threatened how?" Elias answered before Lila had to. "An email," he said, his face dark. "A threat to close the shelter if I protected Lila." The room erupted into shocked whispers. Vivian's expression cracked. "That's," she started, but her voice didn't find ground. Elias's tone sharpened. "We traced it," he said. "It came from an account linked to Crowne Consulting." Vivian's eyes widened. "No," she breathed, and for the first time she sounded truly afraid. The board member stood abruptly. "Vivian," he said, voice shaking with anger. "Is this true?" Vivian looked around, searching for allies, but the room had already decided. People stepped back, smiles vanished. Phones slid out discreetly. Nora leaned toward Elias. "Law enforcement is on their way," she whispered. Elias nodded once. Vivian's assistant tried to slip away, but security, different security now, loyal to Elias, blocked him. Vivian's face twisted, rage replacing charm. "You think this ends here?" she hissed at Lila. Lila's heart pounded, but she met Vivian's eyes. "It ends when you stop hurting people who can't fight back," Lila said, voice steadying. Elias turned to Lila then, his expression softening. "There's more," he said quietly. "Mara's letter also names a trust, a scholarship and housing fund for orphaned youth, and you, Lila Hart, are listed as its first guardian when you turn 18. Lila blinked, stunned. "Me?" she whispered. Elias nodded. "Not because you're perfect," he said. "Because you understand." The room's mood shifted. Anger at Vivian, relief for Lila, something like awe. Vivian's knees seemed to weaken as two officials approached with calm authority, speaking quietly to the board member. Vivian's eyes flicked toward the doors as if she could still run, but there was nowhere left to hide in a room full of witnesses. Lila's chest ached, not with shame now, but with a strange, almost unbearable release. One question finally had a full answer: why she was invited. She wasn't a mistake. She was the missing piece. And as Vivian was escorted out under a storm of whispers, Elias leaned close to Lila and said, "Your mother fought for you before you could even speak. Tonight you finished what she started." Lila's breath shook as applause rose, hesitant at first, then swelling into something real. But before she could even process it, the ballroom doors opened again, and Mrs. Dallow stepped inside with Mina and Jonah clinging to her hands, eyes wide, drawn by Nora's urgent call. Lila saw them, and her knees nearly buckled with love and terror and relief all at once. Weeks later, the Arden Hotel felt like a different universe, but the shelter felt different too, not because it had become fancy, but because fear no longer lived in every corner like dust. The Mercer Foundation board voted Vivian out the next morning, and the donors who once would have looked away suddenly demanded transparency like it was fashionable. Auditors came, records were reviewed. Programs that had been underfunded for years received what they were always supposed to. The shelter got a new roof that didn't leak, a pantry that stayed full, and a classroom with real desks instead of folding tables. Lila watched Mina run through the hallway laughing, shoes that fit her feet, and for the first time she let herself believe that safety could be more than a temporary feeling. Elias didn't become a fairy tale savior. He didn't show up with miracles every day. He showed up with appointments, with paperwork, with hard conversations. He met with Lila weekly, not to control her, but to listen. Sometimes he looked at her like he was still seeing Mara's shadow in her face, and sometimes he looked away like it hurt. Lila learned that grief and guilt could live inside a powerful man too. She also learned he didn't expect her to be grateful in the way rich people liked, quietly, obediently. He expected her to be honest. "Do you want this responsibility?" he asked her one afternoon in his office, sliding a folder across the desk. "Or do you feel trapped by it?" Lila stared at the papers, the trust documents, the scholarship plan, the youth advisory role. She swallowed. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if I mess it up?" Elias nodded, as if that was the only reasonable answer. "Good," he said. "Fear means you know it matters." Lila took a slow breath. "Then yes," she said. "I want it." One question had been answered. Would she be safe? Safer? Yes. Not because the world had become kind, but because she had allies and evidence and a voice people couldn't ignore anymore. But another question lingered in her chest, like a quiet ache. Could she ever forgive the world for the way it treated her before it knew her story? She found her answer in small moments, not big speeches. In Theo, who got promoted and still visited the shelter to help the kids with homework, pretending he wasn't soft. In Nora, who taught Lila how to read budgets like they were weapons, and how to stand in a room full of suits without shrinking. In Mrs. Dallow, who cried once in the kitchen, silently, while stirring soup, because she was relieved and exhausted and still had to cook dinner. Lila didn't forgive the world as a whole. She forgave specific people, one by one, when they proved they deserved it. On the day the new youth fund was announced, Elias handed Lila something wrapped in tissue paper. She opened it carefully. Inside was her original cream invitation, flattened and framed, the wax seal preserved. Under it was a small brass stamp with a simple design, a star inside a circle. "Your mother used that symbol," Elias said softly. "She called it the light that doesn't ask permission." Lila's throat tightened. She traced the star with her fingertip. "So this," she whispered, "was always meant to come back to me." Elias nodded. Lila hung the frame in the shelter hallway, right where the kids could see it when they walked in from the cold. It wasn't a trophy. It was proof. Proof that being pushed out of a door didn't mean the door was right. Proof that an orphan girl could be more than a cautionary tale. As Lila stood there listening to the shelter's new quiet, less fear, more ordinary life, she looked at the framed invitation and asked herself two questions she wanted every kid there to ask someday too. What would you do if the world told you you didn't belong but you knew you did? And if you ever got power, would you use it to shut doors or to hold them open? She didn't answer both out loud. She didn't need to. Her hands went to the brass stamp, and she pressed it gently onto a fresh stack of envelopes, new invitations for kids who had never been invited anywhere. Then she smiled, small but real, and whispered, "Come in. And if you're listening, I'd love to know. Have you ever been judged before anyone heard your side, and what did you do next?"